Planned global food crisis of 2021 has begun. Stock up and be prepared for water and food shortages. Hi folks, welcome to the Financial Argument. Have you ever wondered why some Americans admirably spend their stimulus checks on food, water, and ammo these days? What do you think all these people are preparing for? They probably know some are planning a society for us where food crisis will become an instrument in controlling people. These people are almost preparing for a zombie apocalypse, and they're not wrong. Because what will happen on the streets will be no different. The time of the global food crisis is heading our way, and it was no doubt planned and engineered a very, very long time ago. For those of us who are sufficiently prepared, they know 2021 will be remembered as the beginning of a global food crisis in history books. After I tell you about the latest news and signs regarding serious water, food, and even seed shortages in this video, if you're not already prepared, you should begin immediately. Take 2021 very seriously while there's still time. Many countries, especially China, which know the great disaster that food crisis will cause, are preparing accordingly. If you think that vital skills like fishing, growing your own food, and so on are just hobbies, you're wrong. These so-called hobbies will help keep you alive in the coming years. If you think it's unnecessary to keep your pantry sufficiently stocked with water and emergency food, you're wrong again. After seeing the panic shopping and empty shelves at supermarkets for over a year, you'd have to be willfully blind to think the preppers are crazy. In fact, if you believe that the recent enormous shortages in Texas in recent times are just temporary and everything will be restored to normal, then you're wrong again. Let me first explain the seriousness of the situation, and then I'll describe the latest news and signs. Decreasing incomes, record unemployment figures, a collapsed and hopeless American economy, a fake stock market bubble with red flags everywhere, and the US dollar with a value that decreases day by day. These are just some of the early signs pointing us towards what's to come. Forget the past economic and social disasters we've experienced. If I said that the health crisis was a walk in the park compared to what's coming, maybe then you'll really understand the severity of the situation that will unravel over the next few months. That was just the appetizer. The main course is yet to come. The health crisis was just the catalyst, and it appears the transition to a society you won't recognize is accelerating. What I'm referring to goes beyond just the feeling of empty stomachs. Imagine an average person who's never committed an act of violence watch their child starve. What are people capable of when the situation reaches that point? God bless us all. As early as 1970, Henry Kissinger gave us a hint of this long-term plan when he said, if you control oil, you will manage countries. If you control food, you will manage people. For an example of the recent use of food as a weapon of control, remember the 2008 global food crisis. As a result of the food riots that were sparked in many countries due to globally increasing food prices, the governments of some of these countries were replaced with the leaders the system wanted. Global food prices hit a 6-year high in February. The situation is close to the situation in 2007-2008, when sharp increases in food prices triggered civil unrest in many parts of the world. Since March 2020, vegetable oils have gone up 147%, cereals 126%, dairy 113%, sugar 100%, meat 96%. Food as a whole has gone up by 116%. Chili prices in Indonesia have more than doubled. Beans are 54% more expensive in Brazil. Household spending on food has gone up by more than 50% in Nigeria. The price of sugar has spiked 60% in Russia. This is just a small list of rising food prices. Speaking of people and controlling them, it's worth mentioning a few things in relation to that. Certain estimates project the world population to rise to more than 10 billion people by 2050, and this figure could well reach 11 billion. just thinking out loud, but could someone be taking measures to prevent this population increase in a world where resources are becoming more scarce with each passing day? Well, apart from that, what does 11 billion people mean? It means that in order to feed so many people, a piece of land as fertile as India is needed. And there's no such place of land in the world. There's not enough land in Europe to sustain everyone. Today, an average European citizen needs fertile land with an average size of 2 soccer fields for 1 year of food, which is why Europe makes 60% of its agricultural investments in non-European countries. And that's why many countries, especially China, are engaging in what some would call modern-day colonialism in Africa. Isn't it interesting that the African continent, despite having some of the most fertile land in the world, is the region where the global food crisis is the most intense? According to the FAO data, approximately 16% of the arable agricultural land in the world is on the African continent. The productivity life of existing agricultural areas in Africa is 3 times higher than other agricultural areas in Europe and the world. I guess for some, African land is not enough. Is it a coincidence that 12,000 wildfires broke out at the same time last year in the Amazon jungle of South America? On the other hand, this is why cultured meat and cultured food studies are picking up momentum. The Israeli Cultured Meat Corporation, Miatek, became the first lab-grown meat company listed on the stock market and raised $22 million. In this context, the first thing I will tell you is that if you've even a tiny plot of land, start gardening. Do not sell your land in any way. Yes, you need seeds for your own garden. And folks, the bad news is there is a seed shortage right now. That's why I say take this seriously and get ready while you can. In one of my previous videos, I explained that some products and seed catalogs are not available. Now things seem to be getting worse. Let's look at this story coming out of West Virginia. West Virginians have had to turn to farmers because of the food shortages caused by the health crisis. Well, with the high demand for seeds, seed companies ran out of stock, and even farmers have resorted to trading seeds with each other. Farmers say they've had a hard time finding the seed supply they need and that seeds have almost fallen into a sort of black market. These are bad signs, folks. Let's take a look at some other news. Hudson Valley Seed Company's co-founder and managing director Doug Mueller said that in January 2021, sales are 6 to 7 times higher than the same time last year. Even though February and March are usually higher for home gardeners, within days of the new year, sales spiked. Let's continue with Bill Gates. With 242,000 acres to his name, he's now America's largest private farmland owner. Apart from these official figures, he continues to buy with affiliated companies not only in the U.S., but in many parts of the world. So according to unproven rumors, this number is thought to be 1,200,000 acres of farmland throughout the globe. Of course, we can't know for sure. Other than that, companies such as DeutscheBank and JP Morgan have been purchasing farmland like crazy. Bill Gates buying all this farmland is a very thought-provoking action for someone who has nothing to do with agriculture. Also, it's worth remembering that 9 years ago, he became a partner in a fertilization company. So why are they focusing on farmlands, namely food, so much lately? Are they worried they'll be unable to feed themselves because something will happen soon? Or is there more? No comment. There's another catastrophe we need to be aware of. Today there are nearly 570 million farmers in the world, and 90% of the world's agriculture is done by farming families. This means that thousands of years of knowledge are transferred to each other over the generations. It's one of the legacies of humanity. The world's entire food supply chain is managed by only 5 giant companies. I don't want to say their names here, but you can find them with a simple search. These bio-imperialistic food companies manage the entire food supply chain, from fertilizers to seeds, and from fuel to supermarkets. If the farmland and all the knowledge carried by humanity falls into the hands of industrial companies, it would be a great disaster. For some, this monopoly means cheaper food prices, but in reality it means more control of the people. When we look at history, bread has been the food of the people guaranteed by the state since the Roman Empire. While the health crisis was a catalyst for economic disruption, it showed in other ways. This is how important food is, how important it is to grow our own food, and even how strategic many products such as wheat are. We already know that the food supply chain is broken because every aspect is interconnected. As the global food crisis looms over our heads, every country thinks of itself because everyone has to feed their own people first. They're stopping food exports as many countries do. If you have a population of over 1 billion and are pursuing world domination, then maybe you would import massive amounts of food and pay an incredible amount of extra money like China does. China is taking and storing much more than what it needs and cannot produce due to its natural disasters. Why do you think China buys a record amount of food from almost all countries? What do you think they're preparing and stocking up on food for? Let's go back to the US and see what situation we are in. Some say there's no food shortage in the US yet, but they're overlooking the many people who don't have money to buy food. Unfortunately, it results in the same suffering at the end of the day. A survey conducted by OnePoll looked at the impact of food insecurity across America and the world. 6 in 10 Americans have faced food insecurity at some point, and 73% of these experienced it for the first time last year with the onset of the health crisis. 35% of these said they skipped meals, 32% said they lacked money for food, and 31% said they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. The food bank situation in the U.S. is deplorable. In many states, food banks are working above capacity. Officials are talking about the dramatic increase in the number of families requiring food. Every week, new families arrive at the food bank. Although the situation seems sustainable for a while thanks to donations and volunteers, many food banks will soon be unable to respond to this increasing demand. When that occurs, what will these people do? In Texas, a month after the historic winter storm, food banks are concerned they won't be able to provide enough for the millions of people in need. Stimulus check payments don't replace lost jobs or lost income. Rising food prices are a problem in itself. It's pretty scary to even talk about the possibilities. The more the situation escalates, the more I wonder, where are the trillions of dollars printed by the Fed? Some of you may have witnessed these shortages, while to others everything appears normal. Walmart, Costco, CVS, Publix, and other stores have seen increased demand. Although these shelves seem relatively full in most supermarkets, many share images showing bare shelves or very limited stock in supermarkets in many states. If you heed the warnings now, you won't have to live in the horror movie others will. It's also very clear that non-human factors trigger the food crisis in the U.S. According to the University of Massachusetts, a study showed that 1/3 of the soil needed to sustain crop production in the Midwest has been destroyed. This wasn't a natural result of wind and water erosion, but a century of overflowing. According to the National Academy of Sciences, the figure is higher. Let's take a look at the situation across the rest of the world. Some of you may not see any shortages when you go to your local supermarkets and grocery stores. It shows that you are really lucky. Do this while you still have the opportunity to prepare. A lot of countries all over the world are starting to feel the deeper effects of this. A global food crisis is almost a butterfly effect. A hunger crisis in a country you don't care about may show up at your doorstep because food shortages are going to happen worldwide. An example of this is mass migration starting due to the increasing turmoil and hunger in one corner of the world. As a result of the chain reaction, trade routes become unsafe, causing freight increases and delays. Remember my video about the container crisis causing increasing food prices and shortages all over the world? I warned about this a few months ago when there was no mention of it in the mainstream media. Please look at this news published a week ago. It talks about how the container crisis hit British ports and cities, the supermarket suppliers' warnings of a food shortage in the UK as a result. Remember what I mentioned in my previous videos about Germany and pig prices? Look at this news published a few weeks ago. Pig prices in Germany have risen since countries in Asia, including China, banned German pig imports. so as a result, prices have increased to offset the loss. Let's look at this confidential information coming from North Korea. It also gives us information about the situation in China. A clandestine missionary helping people in North Korea reported last September that almost no food from China had been going into North Korea for almost 2 months, with an increase in beggars and some people dying from hunger. China is not helping because they're stocking up on food for only themselves like crazy. Look at the coming food shortage in Australia. Fruit and vegetable prices are predicted to rise due to serious labor shortages, leading to falling production and rotting food. The Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics and Sciences says prices for some fruits are forecasted to go up 29% this year. And we know bread is life. Look at this news from Syria, which has exported millions of immigrants due to internal turmoil. The news speaks of a shortage of wheat and bread. Europe should be concerned about this because it will more than likely be the target destination of these hungry people. Let's look at India. Their groundwater, which makes up 40% of the water supply, has been depleting for years. More than half of Indians rely on agriculture to survive. This is a serious threat to them. A study found that winter harvests in some areas could decrease by 2/3 leading up to the year 2023 due to the overuse of groundwater. Look at the latest news about the hunger crisis and food shortage in Nigeria. It's the 7th most populous country in the world, with a population of almost 210 million. Unfortunately, hunger in Africa has become a cliché for many, so they do not find it odd that Africa is suffering from a hunger crisis. But the situation is much uglier than in previous years. In South Sudan, they face life-threatening massive food shortages as harvests fall almost by 50%. Look at Lebanon. Their currency has collapsed, resulting in streets full of protesters. Grocery stores around the country have temporarily closed, and a food shortage is looming over their heads as they are reliant on imports. I can go on for hours with this type of information. There's so much more. What is clear is that a planned global food crisis has started in 2021. It's affecting big or small countries, some you may not be able to find on a map or consider insignificant, maybe even in the state you are in, and that you're unaware of. But the butterfly effect is real. You may think what I'm telling you is a conspiracy theory. I hope so. I hope they're all conspiracy theories and I'm wrong. That humanity would be spared from a great catastrophe. But it's obvious that the system is initiating transformation and change, and food will be their biggest instrument. If you do realize the seriousness of the situation, do not be afraid. Prepare while you can, and prepare for all possibilities. Stock up your pantries with water and emergency food. Start growing your own food if you have land. Engage in animal breeding if you can. As I said in the beginning, these have become not a hobby, but a survival skill. I'm not a prepping expert. I only analyze the situation and prepare myself. You can follow expert channels such as my friend Canadian Prepper and others. This is not investment advice, but if you have more possibilities, as I always say, buy physical gold and silver to ensure your financial survival. I think this video is one of the most important videos for the Financial Argument channel, because the signs have never been so pronounced and everything is playing out so clearly now. This is the quiet before the storm. If you like my analysis, don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on notifications to be up to date with all the latest developments. God bless you all.